So, a month later, and now I can review Morbius Part 2, and boy do we get some good stuff. There are some plot twists that floored me, but we also don't get all the answers, making way for a climactic Part 3. But this is from my perspective when the story comes out, so let's get into Morbius Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. We get a nice little recap, good since this is one concurrent story, one part a month, and we pick up where we left off. But not before Narata tells us of a story of how those few who die on Khan are put to rest. A nice little intro, even if it has little bearing on the story, other than fleshing out Gilda and Khan a little. Morbius is still within Veritas and won't let us forget it, as he has designs on a new body and spreading his Voldemort mark like an STD. Middlewitch is confused about the island they seem to have crashed on in the vortex, especially as he seems to get glimpses of movement on the snowy plains. Hymna, surprisingly aware Argento, much better now than we last saw her, takes stock with over a dozen dead, but she calls him out on his mutinous attempts. And much like the dialogue last story, the episode is quite well written, although with faults, once again, by Tim Foley. Middlewitch brings up some real concerns, but decides to use the captain's power, sending Argento out to explore the tundra while he repairs the ship. And for characters that we've basically just met, you really feel their close friendship breaking apart. A real focus in this part of the story. Middlewitch is concerned and Gilda informs him that the Shimmering Man is gone, but he frankly couldn't give a shit. He rallies the people and sets Argento up as incompetent, by making it as if her leaving the ship was her idea. But Gilda manages to convince 3 others to accompany her and Argento, 3 strangely mute unvoiced, may as well be nameless extras. Argento and Gilda make their way across the tundra, the white hurting her eyes. And these two have a pretty good dynamic, Gilda bringing out the best of Argento without forcing it from her, but also respecting Argento's choices. As they leave, Gilda makes sure the 3 extras haven't taken the dark mark, and instead of actually informing Middlewitch, she is all,
"Beware the dark sign, Mr. Middlewitch. I know not what it is, but I know it is not good."
What are you talking about?
We haven't time for this. We're going.
And that shits me a little, but sure, I can believe that that's something she'd say as a member of the Sisterhood of Khan. With their spiritualistic nature. We also get a little more pretty good backstory from Middlewitch, but knowing the Walking Dead effect, that probably means he's on borrowed time, as he also gifts Gilda his spyglass. Rolko returns, yay, and convinces Middlewitch to keep the prisoners on deck so they don't get crushed by the dimensions down below. An obvious trap to us, but Middlewitch is actually quite nice about it. Gilda and Argento make camp and are wary of the creatures stalking the ice. But seriously, I found it far too evident these shipmates don't say a word. Sure, they make sounds, a grunt or two, and eating noises later, but at this point they might as well have had Argento and Gilda go on their own, if not to add to the ramping up of the stakes later in the story. Rolko brings Veritas to Middlewitch, and eventually he's convinced to let half the prisoners at a time assist rebuilding the ship, as we see later, quite easily allowing the mark to spread amongst the rest of the crew. Veritas and Middlewitch have some good interactions, and one more good, candid conversation later on. It's quite well performed, but it was clear to me the direction we were going. Argento names the land in the vortex the Isle of the Dead. A pretty cool title all things considered, and they come across a large icy temple where the Shimmering Man meets them. Still elusive, but far more put together than before. His lines can be cliché, but he is entertaining, and alludes that the reason he knows Argento is that he saw her here, but we don't get a lot else from him. So we'll have to wait until the next part for more info. Once at the temple's doors, the blizzard suddenly dissipates, and they are met by Morbius. Or, well, a holographic interface of the temple, introducing it as a sanctuary built by the real Morbius. Samuel West does well in making this avatar a character all its own, even if based off Morbius' appearance, the hologram feeling quite lonely and having a mean streak of his own. They enter the temple to find a state of grace, keeping Argento in top health, and a meal fit to feed the whole crew. The 3 voiceless shipmates getting aspects of their personalities listed off by the interface, before they are sidelined into eating machines. While they eat, Gilda and Argento follow the interface deeper into the temple. While back on the ship, Middlewitch speaks with Veritas again, telling him that he may attempt to have them pardoned as defectors due to their help. But the conversation isn't all they hoped, as Veritas compares Middlewitch to Morbius. And they discuss his morals, as while he treated races and his underlings equally, he also believed in equally crushing and genociding races. So, not totally evil, but come on, Morbius is a prick. Veritas jabs at the whole captain first mate drama, trying to work under his skin, but they part ways. The interface shows Gilda and Argento the artwork hung in the temple, depicting his exile from Time Lord society, becoming another talk of opposing morals. As while, yes, Morbius wanted equality amongst his people, he also was a psycho warlord, and on the other side of the conversation, time and time again, Rassilon is proved not to be the saint he is propagated as by Time Lord society. It sparks good conversation, but both sides are clearly just ruled by assholes. The Time Lords under Rassilon being just the little tiniest bit the lesser of two evils, not actively going out there and genociding people, unless you're vampires. The interface mentions some strange events, ending on the death of Morbius on Kharn, a fixed point, and the interface reveals this temple is many years ahead of the war, him being left here for a long while. They enter a hall of mirrors, and while Argento is originally unable to look at herself, she follows the interface deeper, finally coming face to face with her fears, first herself, and then a gobsmacking reveal as we see her descendant, the Collective, better known as the 11, played here by Mark Bonnar, in spectacular fashion, speaking to her through the mirror. The story doesn't waste this twist either, as it's explained Argento's aversion to regeneration continued down the family line into the Collective, manifesting in them as their regenerative dissonance. A reveal that came totally out of left field, but carefully thought about, not just thrown in as a cameo. And the interface really rubs the cruelty in. He pokes at her, alluding to Middlewitch's upcoming demise, and Gilda finds herself attempting to rescue someone from inside the mirrors, seeming to live inside the vortex. The being also laughs at her, but I can't tell who's laughing, so it could be an allusion to another aspect of the story, but I assume it'll come into light in the next part. We come back to the dining hall to see the Shimmering Man speak to the interface, and while interesting, it doesn't give us much other than confirmation Morbius is returning, and that the Voiceless Three are doomed, as they choke on the food and the dining hall literally dines on them. The ice of the temple, and even the island later, seeming to have some form of sentience. Argento isn't too happy about this, her and Gilda running, managing to make it out of the living building as the interface menaces at them from afar. Back on the ship, Rolko takes Middlewitch by surprise, tying him up and keeping him unconscious as the whole crew has seemingly been taken over, Middlewitch seemingly fit to sacrifice to resurrect Morbius. Narata gives us some nice viewing into Middlewitch's psyche. Once again the Walking Dead effect, but the stuff she gives us is pretty good, and he wakes to find himself on the tundra, being taken towards the temple. Gilda and Argento mourn the lost men, and with Argento now feeling wounded again and compromised by seeing her friends deconstructed in front of her, their terror reminding her of Middlewitch's face as he watched her die. Veritas goes the poetic way of informing Middlewitch of his upcoming death, and has the crew dig by hand a hole to toss the sacrifice in, Middlewitch having a good moment, as he at least wants his mutinous crew to be given gear to dig. Gilda and Argento wonder where the Shimmering Man is, and they regroup at their camp, once again having a good philosophical talk.
After all this fighting, I thought I was numb to defeat, to death. But this body doesn't feel as tough.
It's tough, all right. For it has Captain Argento at its helm.
And Argento tells Gilda she feels that her crew is out on the ice with them. So Gilda scouts for them with the spyglass, but the creatures are nearby, getting the two running away. Middlewitch spots the mark of Morbius and fails to talk Rolko out of sacrificing him as they toss him into the hole and start filling it. In a nice payoff to part 1, Argento and Gilda spy what the supposed creature is, turning out to be a mass of crows. As we were told in part 1, they used to fly in the vortex, but we don't learn much more than that, as I don't think they appear in part 3 at all. Veritas and the followers let their mark slither into the ice, turning it black and pulling a goblet of fire. You know, marks of the servant, willingly sacrificed. Bones of the Middlewitch, unknowingly given. I think that was my best joke of this whole Morbius Voldemort thing. Within the ice, Middlewitch is pretty gruesomely possessed and transformed into Morbius, as the crows turn overhead, and Gilda and Argento seemingly make it to the ship. using the spyglass to see the crew praying as Morbius quite grandiosely rises. So in desperation and fear, Argento, referencing the first part again, as she uses Rassilon's trinket to call him to save them. The story ending as she does so and someone appears, but I'm guessing it's probably not going to be Rassilon. Personally, considering the Doctor's appearance next part, Tom Baker will probably show up and go, "Hello everyone!" So that was part 2 of Morbius, and much like the first part, it was great. In fact, I think I enjoyed this a little more than the last. This slid in well after part 1, continuing the characters well, me liking them a little better when put into the more action-focused second part, while the first mostly focused on being explanatory, exploratory, and atmospheric. But here the story kicks up and integrates well, using the call of Rassilon, the crows showing up, in clever ways showing that this 3-part structure isn't an afterthought. Morbius does more than sit in Veritas, but Samuel's performance was much better as the interface, having a kind face but his cruel and passive-aggressive tendencies coming along naturally. And while the Glimmering Man was better here, he was still just a mystery for the final part. The inclusion of the 11 and giving a consistent and clever explanation to his regenerative dissonance with seemingly no forewarning was fantastic, especially since it could have just come off as fan wank, but it's natural to the story and is a pretty cool addition to Argento's character. The stuff with the crew and Middle Witch was a little underwhelming. I was far more interested in Gilda and the captain, so every time we went back to the ship I was thinking, alright, are they going to go evil yet? But it was still well done, not lazy or bad in any way. The ending for the part was a nice setup for the final part, both with the call of Rassilon and the resurrection of Morbius, really psyching you up for it, even if it's a bit away. But I seriously can't get over how in this story, these elements of Morbius I don't remember being from any existing Doctor Who media really make him feel like Space Voldemort. And that just can't be a good thing, because every time I find a connection I just start laughing to myself. And that's doing the character a disservice. At least that's what I think. But otherwise, again, he was used better than in the last part. So overall, with all this together, I'll put part 2 just above part 1 at an 8.5 out of 10. I'm seriously enjoying this on a story, character, and atmospheric creative level. I just hope that part 3 will live up to this setup. Thank you everybody for watching my review of part 2 of Morbius, and we'll be back very soon with part 3. Please like the video if you liked it, comment down below if you wish, and consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, ring that notification bell so you're told every single time that I make an upload. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next review. Bye!
Toast. A little piece of toast. Because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.